Hi, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's Choice event, already number 88. And it's going to be about how to build the ecosystem for Scope 3 action, or differently put, as you will see it, a love story about how SCHOTT Pharma and the Alliance to Zero are driving systematic change. Now, my name is Josepha. I'm the growth marketing lead at Climate Choice, and I'm super happy to have you with us today. It's the first time now after quite some month that I'm having a hoodie on again. So yeah, autumn is at least hitting here in Berlin, and it's very nice to see all of you still joining the call on this Tuesday. So we changed it from Thursday to Tuesday, trying out different formats, and it's nice that quite some familiar names are already on the call. That being said, some names I recognize, and for quite some others, I think it's going to be the first time that you're actually joining us in this ever-growing community. So a very warm welcome also to you. And what we try to do together is that we dive into one of the most complex and yet strategic topics in climate action, and that is Scope 3 decarbonization. And if you're now wondering not only what this webinar is about, but also how we are and who we are, well, we are Climate Choice, your climate intelligence platform and companion for all the sustainability and procurement teams out there that are trying to go beyond manual data collection and reporting. Because what we really want to do is to enable all of you to access supply-specific and audit-ready emission data to really build actionable roadmaps for climate impact. And because Scope 3 isn't just complex, as everybody always says, but because it's also a beautifully cross-functional, cross-industry and cross-industry initiative, we created this webinar series to really share real-world examples and best practices from pioneers all around the world that are already driving Scope 3 transformation in their organizations and beyond. And now, when we talk about Scope 3, there's quite some focus, right, on supplier data, reporting complexity, or regulatory pressure. But as we've seen now in a lot of talks to our customers and to our many companions on the way, Encounter's project, what really also then moves the needle is that Scope 3 is much more than numbers. It's really also about mindset, structures, and ecosystems. And that's especially true in industries that are highly regulated, like the pharmaceutical industry. Because here transformation is often not a question of technology, but of co-innovation across company borders and finding ways to challenge this, how things have always been done. And this needs to be done together. And that's why I'm incredibly excited about today's session, because we will hear how one company is really pioneering systematic change in the pharma sector that is not exactly known for being fast moving. And I actually have experienced this already because I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for quite some years. And the company that we are talking about today is called SCHOTT Pharma, one of the founding members also of the Alliance to Zero, which is a cross-industry collaboration of suppliers, manufacturers, and other healthcare partners aiming to make net zero pharma products a reality. And of course, I will not be talking on behalf of SCHOTT Pharma, but we are joined today by someone who is deeply familiar with the realities of transforming this very complex system. And this not on paper, but in practice. Yes, and now I have to concentrate myself to really spell out everything correctly. But the head of service and sustainability management at SCHOTT Pharma, president of the Alliance to Zero, and one of the key voices driving innovation regulated environments by combining both the technical know-how, value chain collaboration, and strategic sustainability leadership. So let's welcome all on this virtual stage, Arne Kloke. Hey, Arne.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And thanks for giving me that Chinese number of luck, the 88.
This is completely fine. And I think if we stick with luck, then we will all leave this webinar very happy today. But I mean, how did you start the day? How was it for you preparing for the webinar? How's the mood?
Good. Really excited to have the discussion. Also looking forward to seeing what is the audience thinking, what questions might come up. So very happy to be here and
yeah,
been
definitely.
asked to share some of the insights and looking forward to the discussion that comes out.
Yeah, and I mean, I was very lucky that we already had some pre-discussions, and yet, I mean, it's always something different when you then actually go into the proper presentation mode. And I think, I mean, we will be inviting the audience, of course, the entire time to then also share questions, comments, etc. In the chat. But before we open it up on the topic of, yeah, more around SCHOTT Pharma and this entire environment of change, there's so many titles and so many years of experience that you can find on LinkedIn and whatnot. But Arne, maybe you can tell us a little bit also what happened behind the scenes. Who are you? Where do you actually come from? And how did you get where you are today?
Yeah. So maybe I show you a bit the products of what we're working on, because that makes clear where I am currently. So where I am currently, the company SCHOTT Pharma, we are producing primary packaging to store liquid drugs, so-called parenterals. And it's a mass production. We're supplying that to pharma. It's about 13 billion injections per year that are using our product. So our job is to make the storage of drugs safe and easy. And therefore, it is a highly regulated environment that what you just mentioned before. And I started 11 years back in development, and then I was in the strategy department. And I was mostly looking for adjacencies, but then also some topics came up where we were looking for an answer across the different departments that we're having. And one of them has been sustainability. So that's maybe 5 years back, something like that. And starting with that, it was always part of my focus. And we developed a program out of what we were seeing as a demand on the customer side and out of the understanding of what is our impacts. And then I had the chance to form a sustainability department around those topics. So we're responsible with some colleagues to execute the sustainability reporting, but mostly we try to work out solutions for our customers that reduce the impact of our products on the environment. So the slogan is kind of safe for the patient and sustainable for the planet. That's what is guiding the activities that we're doing.
Nice, thank you. And I mean, now that we at least, got a very small sneak peek already into what SCHOTT Pharma is doing and a little bit more of a background information of who you are, I would actually also like to introduce the second speaker for today, because she will be joining our conversation. And she's actually my dear colleague and the co-founder of Climate Choice, Lara Obst. And she has the beautiful experience of, already been working with clients together from various industries. I mean, pharma is also a big industry that we're working with together, but for sure also many others. And Laura will be showing how organizations can move from data transparency to climate action. Exactly also, Anna, what we will be talking about. But our focus is on using data as a driver of Scope 3 impact. So Laura, I'm very happy that you also joined us now on this virtual stage. Also to you, how's your day going? How was the start of it?
Yeah, I'm as excited as Arne. That's already the ChoiceEvent 88. It's really unbelievable. And we have each time like so great experts. And I think, what makes it beauty is really to have experts that are directly from the field. So what Josefa said, right? It's always so interesting to see how people from across different industries actually have the same issues. So we always, when we talk with companies about Scope 3, I think in every call, people kind of start with a sentence like, I'm so sorry, we are a little bit behind, or like, actually, we don't really have a transparent data set, or it's so hard to collaborate with our suppliers and so on. So we are lagging a little bit behind, and everyone has kind of the same feeling. And really, these events or our choice events are really about to share this inspiration of how things can be done, and that you do not really have to reinvent the wheel, but that we all have the same issues and that really collaboration is key. key, even though we totally believe in bringing data as a transparency baseline. It's then really the beauty how you use it and how you transform really industries by it. So I'm as excited to listen in and learn more from Arne and then come back for the discussion in the end.
Yeah, but Laura, before you leave us for the presentation on SCHOTT Pharma, you've been saying that there's many, people also, coming to the point of having or facing the same issues. But there's also, the beauty of this field that many people are already advancing, yet they might have a different maturity level. And I know that you brought us two questions that we actually wanted to ask the audience. So, first of all, get you activated to show you how the poll function works, to motivate you to share your questions, but also for Arne to actually know who's with us here on the call. So Laura, maybe you want to then also read it to us and just find out whom we have with us today.
Yeah, it's always great to not only know who's here on stage and who's talking, but then also who's joining us. So you should see on your screen right now a quiz popping up and first asking you in which role are you actually working on Scope 3 action? Because that's also something we have learned. Almost no one is called decarbonization or Scope 3 leader or something. So you might be a sustainability manager, you might work in procurement, maybe data and quality is your topic, sometimes innovation manager, or also any kind of other role. So it can really be across teams, and that's always exciting to learn. And I'm sure we have a lot of expertise already in the room. And then the second question is, related to our topic today, believing in collaboration and ecosystems. So are you already in this role part of any kind of community or ecosystem tackling Scope 3? And we have the very clear yes and no. Then also the not sure, maybe someone else in your company is and you are not really aware that you're also part of it, or you are planning to build up your own ecosystem, become part of the ecosystem and so on. So you can choose from it. And I still see some movement. So it's anonymously, there's no name connected to it. And I'm gonna stop it now and read the answers. So 75% of you are sustainability managers. No surprise, I guess. But then there are also 8% procurement leaders and 70% others. So that's also interesting to know. You might want to share in the chat what's your role then officially. And then 36% say no, they are not part of so 1/3 or 40% almost are not part of a community yet. 27% are, that's also interesting. And then the others are not sure or planning. So I would say mainly sustainability manager, and also most people are not yet part of a community and might want to learn how to do that. Arne, does that surprise you? Does that help you?
That's helping me, of course. I would be happy if there is some innovation managers as well, because I think to drive sustainability, we really need to think that as innovation. So that's definitely key partners, that you have the strategy department, innovation, or whatever to create the drive.
All right, let's get them on board at least after the call. This is the latest then, maybe as a motivation.
Everyone
They're more the YouTubers.
You can send the recording later to the innovation team.
Correct. All right. But now, let's kick it off, because I think everybody's as excited as Lara and myself, at least, to find out more. And Anna, you mentioned just on the first slide that you quickly shared with us that SCHOTT Pharma produces around 13 billion injections annually. And that's a massive responsibility, right? I think everybody thinking about injections already, there's quite some, feeling coming up. But in this context, it's really in terms of both product safety and environmental impact. So could you maybe say, from a company perspective, where do you see the biggest leverage to turn this responsibility into concrete sustainability action? Or differently put, what are your strategic goals around sustainability and around Scope 3?
Yeah. So we mostly looked at the impacts, but we also looked heavily at the customer interest. So I had a course at the University of St. Gallen, which is mostly around economics. And there is two things you learn there. The first thing is if you're asked for something, you answer, it depends. And the second is if you have to show something, then you create a 2x2 matrix. And so we really, with all the ideas, we looked at both the environmental impact or the social impact of the topics, but we also looked at the customer interest to create a business case also for sustainability. There is many things which are at the compliance level that you have to do, but there is some things that where you can really bring in change, where you find a pain point also at the customer, where you can create active value, and this is where we wanted to focus on. That's how we have set up the program. So we have done also the materiality assessment to also cross-check, and I think you made a great guess. You mentioned decarbonization as a matter, and you mentioned the patient safety. So if you look for our materiality assessment, the patient safety is on the upper right on the materiality assessment. But on the other hand, there is the decarbonization, which on the one hand side is scope 1 and 2. Our customers feel that a bit as a number, but that's very abstract. But there is elements that we're forwarding next to our products. That's a lot of plastic packaging that we're sending to our customers, and they feel that as waste. So in our materiality assessment, you also find the waste. In the internal strategy prioritization, you see the waste even boosted because that is something that is a problem between us and our customers. And so we have set a focus next to the standard internal decarbonization topics, really on the packaging.
And now, I mean, I guess that this actually goes way beyond what you would need to do when it comes to compliance, right? So maybe you can describe a little bit what this looks like also in your day-to-day work. How do you manage? I mean, of course, your role description comes with it, but how do you really manage to anchor sustainability, not just as a duty, but then also as a core part of the business strategy?
Yeah, we're working closely with the customers. That's the one thing. So if there is core meetings between the companies, then typically we play a role in there to propose what are offerings that we can see or ideas, what we could develop together. And out of this, we are also creating another matrix, which is looking for customers in terms of their business value. And on the other axis, we list them with their maturity on sustainability and their interest to find out who are the ones where we really can succeed in starting innovation with.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think, I mean, you also mentioned in the beginning, right? This like topic of being highly regulated, the entire like pharma industry. Can you maybe then also share what's so unique about really tackling scope 3 in the pharma industry? I know that you also brought some slides on it, but yeah, for everybody here on the call, that would be very interesting, I think, to hear.
Yeah, we can go through two examples of this. I would just like to emphasize one thing in advance. We also looked in the headline for the term ecosystems. If you think of our decarbonization journey, also we have SBTi targets in place. We are committed to reduce our climate impact. And there is many things you could potentially change, but they split into two categories. We can change the electricity source that we're using. It is not changing what we need to purchase. It is not changing what's on the product. But as soon as we touch something on the product that alters it, that's where regulation comes into place, and the fear and the reluctance towards change starts in the pharma industry. We love products that come to the markets and that can be run over a long time. Whenever you change something that is interfacing with the drug, and our products do, then it requires to assess that change, but also to adapt it in the way how those drug products are filed. If you think of the packaging we do around our product, which is also packaging, you have to think of if something is outgassing to the inside of a vial, you take the injection, it will be part of what you're sending into the patient. And that's why change is not the core friend in the room, and therefore creating a certain mindset in the industry. And therefore, our specialty has now become to playing exactly with that field. And you find that in the headline of the slides that I brought with you. So making change is always difficult. Regulation is the extra spice that makes it even more challenging, or the hard way. So you need to love change if you want to create impact in our industry. But you just have to start doing it. It's not impossible. So the first example that I brought with me is this tray. So it is a single-use tray. It is always made from virgin material, so that we have the control on the supply chain, meaning the control of the material, how it can potentially outgas into those vials. Therefore, we buy not only polypropylene here, we buy a polypropylene that comes with way more documentation so that it can be called food grade, or some companies call it medical grade. So it comes with extra cost. After a single use, this is where you find it. We are in a B2B context. So what do our customers do? The entire day, they run automated machines, and at the same place, the same waste is generated all the time. You see a bit different colors, but the core material is the same. And in principle, it is just that white material. You don't have to mix in the other colors here. They come from somewhere else. So we can have a very pure stream. That's the one thing that I learned when I was at a customer for a totally different topic, but they emphasized how much waste they are getting from us, so they wanted to show it to me. So the full container, and it's not like the container is there and after a year it is full. Those containers frequently, sometimes more than once a week, are leaving those companies. 2 weeks later, I was at a supplier, and we were discussing about different options. And what I was seeing was a recycling machine next to their manufacturing. And then I said, hey, you have recycling equipment here. And what are you doing with it? And then they said, they're using that to recycle the scrap that they have, but I should not be afraid. Of course, and they laughed. They will never use it for our industry. For all other industries, they are serving, they're using it, but not for ours, because they know that in our regulations, it is virgin material only. And so I was seeing within a very short time the problem and felt the mass of it, and I was seeing the solution of it. And I came to the question, is that really true? Can we really, because of regulation, not recycle the material and use it? And so what we did is we said, okay, if it's written in the regulation, those books are the US Pharmacopoeia, so the legislation in the US, there is also European elements and so on. What we found out, they just don't cover the details of secondary packaging. They have other things they are taking care, but it's not written in. And so what you find when carefully going through the book is the obligation that we have to control the material stream that comes in and the material stream that comes out, to make sure at every point we know what's in there so that we can control patient safety. Okay, that's another job than using virgin material. And so what did we do? We said, how can we still control it and recycle it? Yeah, we need to take the selected materials that we brought into the system and just take that back from the pharmaceutical companies and recycle it. So we can learn about the degradation of the material. We can qualify that. That will be always the same. And we can set up a process how to collect, how to execute the return logistics, how to reprocess it, how to implement the quality controls, and then the manufacturing from the recycled content, so that we have a good process control against contaminants that come from the outside. So after we learn from our suppliers, what they learned from us, that it's a no-go, what we also heard from our customers before, that it's a no-go, we went again to customers and we showed them what's written in the pharmacopoeia and gave them the idea how we want to control. And they said, where's the problem? We did that with 5 of our 10 largest customers. They all confirmed no problem. So we understood, okay, with that idea, we are on the right track. We had to find allies that are kind of like-minded, that also don't have too many different colors, that don't have paper labels on it so that it's very easy to recycle it, that are in a good distance to where we are. And so we were very happy to win Pfizer and Takeda. And we were then discussing with all parties on the table the different measures we want to take, how we implement it. And we did the conception in pharma language, which means you have a case how it is today, you have a target state, and then you run a risk assessment on what does that change mean, and to define the measures that we have to implement. Then we did it at ton scale to demonstrate it. We used that also to run all the tests we needed. So we were able to prove that the material, when treated as we designed it, is just as good as the virgin material for our purpose. And then in October last year, we went to the CPHI. That's in pharma, like the autumn fashion week. That was in Milan. And Philip out of my team, who was the project manager and really pushing that through, Magali of Corplex, so our supplier of those elements, and a colleague from Takeda, Jörn, they all came together on stage to tell the story. We did that by purpose to also show that this is feasible. If a SCHOTT Pharma would go on stage and we say, hey, here is our idea how to do it, then we again have the pharma companies in the audience saying, probably you're new in pharma, you don't understand it correctly, but we need to use virgin material. If the entire ecosystem comes together, we can develop a solution that respects all the aspects, but we can also tell the audience it's working so that the others are asking themselves, why haven't we started that initiative or been part of it? So that's the way how we worked on that.
Wow, super nice. And I think, you directly, you put up 2 very big hurdles that you then, succeeded to actually jump over, because you mentioned clearly that change is not a core friend of the industry. And I like it how you beautifully wrapped this up, yet you did it. And also Scope 3 doesn't work without the ecosystem. And you build here a first ecosystem up. So, I mean, you already mentioned some points to it, but why do you think is the shift in thinking, so from single company focus to really an ecosystem perspective, so central for Scope 3 success in the pharmaceutical industry?
So we had the idea we want a tray that uses recycled material. We also looked into reuse. It's not working with that design. And then we said, yeah, let's look into closed loop recycling. But how to really do it? What is the technical things that you need? How can you then make good trays out of this? This is no knowledge that is on our side. That's where Corplex and their willingness to innovate and to make a different recycling with us, not the standard, to understand the differences, to drive a joint solution with us being kind of the gatekeeper, what can be acceptable, and so on, with them coming up with more the technical expertise. And then we need to feed it towards pharma, and we need to have their expectations, their concerns on the table. We need to bring that into the solution. Also, how to collect it. That's now one of the big topics. We demonstrated it with 5 to 10 tons, something like that. And then you need to bring it into routine. It needs to be pragmatic. It's accepted to be a change. So everybody needs to move a bit from the way how they work today. And they need to accept that they work differently a bit. So you need to develop the solution reflecting also their perspectives. That's why it is so important, and that forms, in that case, that magic triangle.
Yeah, very interesting. And maybe, I mean, you can also share a little bit of a moment behind the scenes. Maybe there was like one aha moment where you said, wow, okay, this is something that worked out so well or that didn't, that I want to take further in order to then also use it for other projects. So I guess my question is, showed this like tray example, but what would be needed now to consider if we wanted to scale such a industry collaboration up for further or even bigger projects?
Yeah. Not every, so for the pharmaceutical companies, it means they need to sort more in their waste management process. And we need to fit that to the KPIs. Typically, the KPIs are the total volume of waste. If you say we take the waste and make something new out of it, the total volume stays the same. If we say we recycle it and they give it to a company that gives them a stamp on recycling, whatever they are doing with that afterwards, then they also have the other KPI in place, the recycling rate. So it is very difficult now because you need to understand a lot about what happens there and to understand that recycling is not recycling. An easy thing to understand is we have to control also the traces in that material. So we cannot buy from the market from an uncertain origin material. The only way how we can feed recycled content, therefore reduce the CO2 footprint of that packaging, but also to reduce the dependence on its fossil sources behind, if we run that loop. That's like a different department, and the pharmaceutical company is typically quite large, so often they don't know each other, the people at the gate that goes into the company and the one that goes out, or the procurement team. So that's something that is very complex and now difficult for the scaling.
And I mean, talking about scaling, I think, I mean, innovation is nice. So there needs to be a lot of unstructured room, maybe, but there also needs to be some sort of a home base. And I know from the pre-discussion that we had that actually you created such a home space for really looking at cross-value chain collaboration and at product innovation, which is one of the topics that you also mentioned earlier in this talk, is actually where usually we as human beings working in the pharmaceutical industry are a little bit scared, yeah? So maybe you could elaborate of scaling maybe not only in the amount of product innovations, but also the amount of time and resources that you put in it at SCHOTT Pharma.
Yeah. So in that case, we had a specific problem and we were developing a specific group to solve this problem. What Josefa triggered is our continuous home for sustainable co-innovation. And I'd like to give you an example on that, but I also need your help. Please do me a favor, take a pen and hold it in your hand until I tell you that you can stop it. So this is a group of 8 companies that we founded about 4 years back now. And those companies together are representing the supply chain of auto-injectors. So most of you probably know an insulin pen. An auto-injector includes a syringe as a single shot, now very popular around the obesity drugs. So it's an injection device. And what you need for that is, of course, the core components of an injection device. That's what Ypsomed is doing. You need a syringe inside. You can get that from us, of course. You need some plungers to close it. You need a label on it. You need machines to assemble it. You need machines to package it. You need a cardboard box to send it out in. You need someone to execute the packaging that's sharp. And maybe you end up with some waste. So you need a good platform how to make the best out of your waste, what is done by the company ChoiceEvent. So together, we continuously meet twice a year on site. We have several working groups where we're working on specific problems around the supply chain. So it's not something that solves the decarbonization of the world, but we work on what we are good in, where we have the competences and where we can really drive change. And we came together with a big ambition. We want to facilitate the industry change to net zero injection devices, looking at its supply chain. And when we started to work on it, one of the first problems we encountered is we don't know whether the one or the other hotspot one of the companies is talking about is more important than the other. So a first exercise that we did when we came together is we wanted to make a baseline of the supply chain for auto-injectors. But we were not finding the right toolbox in order to do that across company borders. So we were writing a guideline for a method that allows us to do that without double counting across the company fences. And we did that for the example of such an auto-injector where you have 2 auto-injectors delivered in one cardboard box. And around that time, we also had to look for a name for that club. And our initial name was the Circular Alliance. And then we said, no, we're here to go towards net zero devices. That's why we then decided to be the Alliance to Zero. But already that baseline gave us something that is really guiding our thinking. If you look for that graph here, you see in its baseline, there is a large chunk from the end of life, and there is a very large chunk of the raw material. And the gray, the others, is including processing, but also the commuting to go to the pharmacy, for instance, is a big chunk in there. If we now get back to the term circularity, that's the shortcut between the end of life, which turns it into a birth of life or a restart of life, and the raw materials. So within that club, it was a joint learning platform. We had the open discussion. We first gave a pushback. We jointly learned out of the data that if we want to succeed with something that is net zero, what we consider 90% reduced, then we cannot neglect circularity. We have to work on the circularity and bring back devices. We need to implement that as a replacement of the raw materials. In our next exercise, we then were brainstorming how far can we get down? And that's where you come into play again. And I think Lara has prepared something for you. So you think there is a club of 8 companies, they come together, they do kind of the best what they can. How good is our imagination? How strong were we able to project? How far can we get down the footprint of such auto injectors?
So for that, as Arne said, there's a quick poll that should come up. So for the question, what do you think is the reduction potential that the Alliance has identified of emissions in percentage? Is it like 50%, 60, 70, 80, or even 90 when talking about net zero? That's where we all want to come towards. So you should find that quick poll on your screen. Again, you can answer anonymously. And I see that people A take part and B seem to be very optimistic. So I'm sharing the answer. You should see it on your screen. 80% is the reduction potential that almost 45% of the audience believed in.
Yeah.
So how much was it?
Around 70%. So the next learning was that job is really hard, and the ambition we have put out is very ambitious and really hard to get there. So the other learning is some of the blocking points to implement the things are, you can guess it, some regulatory topics. And so also the Alliance to Zero is a change lover and loves it the hard way. If you look for an auto injector, and you kind of take that apart, you see it is some springs, it is some plastic elements, unfortunately very different plastics in its nature. Sometimes it's the type of plastic plus its variance in colors that is out there. And we were looking into a closed loop recycling concept here as well. But we also came to the point, if we could disassemble it, do we really have to burn it all? So we use the Alliance as a hub to also rethink really the opportunities and come up to different models. But the core blocking point, independent of whether you refurbish such an auto injector or whether you use closed loop recycled materials, I hope you still have the pen in your hand, but I have bad news for you. This is not tested for biocompatibility and skin contact compliance. But I'm optimist, so I believe you're still living, but that's different here. If we say we recycle those materials, we bring it again to a medical device, then we need a story about biocompatibility. And again, the pharma industry, what does the pharma industry say? It's written in the legislation that you have to use virgin material. Okay, now looking up, of course, it's not written in there. There is a biocompatibility norm on skin contact. What is the #1 duty you have to do in there? You need to do a risk assessment. So now you can do the risk assessment for yourself. It was not an hour that you touched your pen. I guess you still feel good. If we talk about an auto injector, it's in that beautiful cardboard box. You take it out, you pull out one piece, bring it to your skin, you push once, take it away. So we're talking about 10 seconds. So if recycled content once leads to that there is a black dot because there was a chewing gum or whatever of an operator in what has led to it, and maybe is a bit hazardous to your skin, that's a very short contact, and that's not every time that you're using such an auto injector. So what we try to do here is also making interviews with the industry, and the feedback on those interviews by experts in the industry was, yes, you're so right, and it's so great that you bring up that topic. And over time, it really felt ridiculous.
And I think ridiculous is actually quite a good key point, because I think once it starts to feel ridiculous, then you also feel like, why didn't we move before? So maybe can you just real quick share some of the key learnings when it comes to overcoming this hurdle of regulation? So one of the biggest hurdles that we actually also confront in many different industries, not only pharma,
Yeah.
that would be really cool.
Yeah. Let me answer that on the next slide. So the key learnings on this is, if you want to drive something, you need to make it specific, and you need to understand what you're talking about. That's why I think sustainability needs to be a discipline that acts on your product, and you need to have the product understanding and industry understanding in it. You cannot only study sustainability, you also really need to study the industry and the products you want to bring impact on. And then you need to use the language of the industry, which in our case is reading the pharmacopoeia and executing risk assessments. You always need to listen. Jeff Bezos said something like, you should always listen, but it's not about following. There is a thinking process in between. You need to translate that. You need to form your opinion. In pharma, often you hear this is not okay because of GMP or pharmacopoeia. GMP is mostly saying you need to think, you need to have the control on how materials are moving. That's probably the same in your industry, and the pharmacopoeia is something you can look into. Make sure that it's correct what people are telling you at the coffee machine. And then you need to find allies in your organization, but you also need to find it outside. And if you have found them, don't work in a loose way. So the way how we work with Corplex or Pfizer or Takeda, we have made it in written. With the legal department, we were writing down, what are you obliged to do? What are you getting for this? So that there is a clear commitment on what you want to achieve and who does what. And at the end, each initiative needs someone who drives it and goes the extra mile. It's also a long path. So those projects, they are not a single year, it's multiple years for us. So sometimes it's happy, sometimes everything is cool, sometimes not. Don't give up. And you need to have someone who is really committed to drive the change, sometimes also to bring back the other parties to the table. And then also, of course, you need a clear plan. Also, how you can communicate the story later on, that need to be part of your activities, that you're getting those elements together to drive the change. And
Yeah.
So the key learning is, yes, we're complicated and we're reluctant in the industry, but if you start doing it, you can.
Thank you. And Anna, I'm also on the follow-up. I will actually share the very great example of the secure blister-free syringe and the article of how you use the alliance to actually come up with this cross supply chain innovation, the product innovation, and just did it. And I think this really shows, right, how then also a forward-looking mindset is very great, how talking about things and understanding them is very important. And but actually then also at some point in time you need to be bold enough to take a very first step and you just showed us here also how this Alliance to Zero, for example, is a very trusted group that enables exactly this exchange in the field of experimentation. And what we, I think, see a lot, and Lara, I mean, you can, of course, also share your experience that is way longer than mine, is that it's quite a fine line between you need to collect the right data to build this baseline for transparency and for argumentation, but then also you need to become pragmatic at some point in time to really get into action for real world impact. And I guess it's very fine, this line, and it's quite some customers struggling with it because it's so hard to navigate. And this is exactly, I think, also where we try to come providing external support through the platform, but also the ever-growing climate community of Scope 3 action leaders. Yeah, really bringing in this like multi-perspective innovation across industries. And Lara, maybe you would like to just pick it up, because we now saw a very specific example, but zooming out a bit of what we do as Climate Choice to potentially also have others taking the steps that Arne was just presenting.
Yeah, super happy to do so. And first of all, yeah, thanks, Arne, for sharing all that work. I think it always looks easy when you have it on slides ready to present, but in the way it must have been a lot of hurdles and a lot of discussions. And yeah, as Josefa said, I totally love it because it shows examples, so to say, of what we see in so many different industries, right? So typically we work with the sustainability leaders or the sustainability procurement leaders, and for some reason or the other, they got Scope 3 as their key topic. So it might have emerged in science-based targets, in reporting from their customers that they're already part of CO2 taxation or pricing and bidding and so on, and that they really struggle to find out, like, how can we really leverage now our emissions? Maybe they created already based on average data, like for a few years calculation, but then it's really about that story that Arne shared, like to really get in contact with the suppliers and get into action mode. And also, yeah, doing all the different steps. So it starts maybe with tracking some data. And also, Arne, you said, right, to understand really the maturity of my supply chain partner. So it's not just like getting some information, PCF or CCF data, so emission data, but then really understanding how far in the process are they? Do they just have targets written on paper? Or are they already finding new material, changing processes, reducing emissions by changing energy and so on? So we really want to understand where they stand and then engage the suppliers and then make it our own action plan and their action plan. So really work together on that roadmap. And yeah, that's what we first of all tackle with providing the data platform to really bring in baselining, where we work on, yeah, working together and collecting data from hundreds and thousands of suppliers, making it really documented, that you have proof points and not just like a questionnaire where some data points come back and then you have a comma somewhere else and it's not usable at all, but really understand if these yeah, emission data are driven really by documents and reporting, but then also come towards an action. And that's where we step out of the platform and where we really learned over the time that every single company asks us, like, how are others are doing it? And for sure, we cannot share it beside webinars or maybe at our summit and so on. So what we started is now 2 years ago already is a Scope 3 action group, where we by now have actually over 50 companies from across industries and really bring them together. We meet regularly in person, also at the summit, we share best practices, but then we really bring it down to like a 4 months journey where everyone starts in joining that community, where we go through these 3 modules and really first understand what is your own data set, how mature is your own company, then engaging the suppliers, like starting with your top suppliers, engaging then the long tail of the supply chain as well, assessing their maturity, either based on public data or really integrating these suppliers and providing you emission data and other information, and then building out of that really a practical roadmap that you can break down to the next 12 months and share. So Arne again said you need to find your allies. So typically what we end the 4 months journey with is that we then meet in person. So you share it in the community of the Scope 3 Action Group, your plan. But then you have also a written document that you work on in this journey and present it internally, typically to your procurement team, maybe CFO, CEO, and then really work on getting the budget and doing the next steps. And it evolves into journeys that we shared then on the summit or in this webinar series also, integrating your up and downstream suppliers in a certain project, creating lighthouse projects, maybe building own internal communities. We also shared that, for example, with Lenovo. They have a wonderful community, bringing in supplier awards and so on. So like really working on, okay, first having a data baseline on understanding where the suppliers stand and how mature they are, and then exchanging with others, getting ideas in, and then really building up an actionable roadmap where you identify what is the single one thing you can do to improve cost reduction, emission reduction, and really innovation, most often towards the product itself. And yeah, as here on the slide, our next group is starting in September, but then as said, it's an existing community. Anyone can join. Webinars are the first step. And if you're interested, reach out to Josefa.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's quite some interest actually also in the Q&A in the chat. So the questions that we can't take up, we will try to then also answer them individually afterwards. But Lara, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think also coming to the end of such a program, right, where people have the roadmap built up, one of the key questions is then, okay, so what is now the business case? Where do we get the resources from in order to implement it? And Nicolas Schweigert, who is also on the call, actually asked this question too. So looking now at this initiative, for example, of the syringe or what else you did in the Alliance, he's asking if it helped you to increase sales, increase profitability, or what are in general the benefits of such initiatives outside. It's good to contribute to climate mitigation. Maybe you can give a little bit of an insight there.
Yeah, this is actually hard to measure, because if we win sales, there is so many effects that make true that we're winning a certain project. We have one very prominent project that we won with a clear feedback on our sustainability concept in the beginning, which was very interesting also in terms of sales. So that gave us, of course, a tailwind for everything that we're doing. Other benefits are clearly you get to know the company from different angles. Often companies in B2B focus everything through procurement. Sustainability, people are a good cop and they're allowed to pass the door, and you get to know other people in the company, so you learn about the company. That's also part of the game. There is another question on whether we directly engage with the customers. Yes, of course. That's the core element. Sustainability change for me is an innovation discipline. And innovation means you need to start with the understanding of a pain point. You need to get to know that. You need to know the people, you need to know the facts, and you need to develop solutions around that. So how do we do that? Sometimes we connect via our salespeople, but often with big pharmaceutical companies, they have their SBTi targets, so they need to run such supplier engagement. They ask us for what we do, and if we then like them, we don't let them go. That's the way how we work.
Yeah. Good love story there. Thank you.
Another love story then. Yeah.
Yeah. And Clara, maybe one last word from you before we close the session. What is maybe one key advice for companies just getting started, as you mentioned, right? I mean, we saw the slides from Arne and can sometimes be quite overwhelming. But what would you say people who are here on the call who might be at a little bit of a different status when it comes to their journey so far?
Yeah, that's what I said in the beginning, right? Most people we talk to, they first start with saying they are sorry, they are so far behind. So sometimes it's also totally the opposite. I look from the outside and say you're very far ahead. You should speak to more people. But I think for the most people, they are kind of in the beginning or somewhere in the middle. Maybe they have started some conversations with a few suppliers that they can pick up the phone and really have a conversation going. But I would say you should not be overwhelmed by very highlight cases, which is nice, hearing all the stories, what you could directly impact at the suppliers and at the product and so on. That's where you want to come. But I think really doing step by step and breaking it down and being also confident that you can do one step at a time. So that's what I would give as an advice. So really start simple, use your first few suppliers to go into an action mode that's outside your company, get your data right to really know from where you're starting, and then try with them a first trial and like bring a good case study. So maybe not just a risk assessment, but also a good case, success case where you can show that you maybe reduce costs, that you won a new customer, that you could do maybe the product with at least emission at the same costs or bringing savings and so on. And then from there scale. So really pick your first example of what you can do or your first sample, and then go into scaling, and don't be afraid to not reach the end goal in the first step.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So counting back is always good. So having a goal in mind, but then sometimes also just get started and be open to be maybe surprised what comes on the way. And then, yeah, deviate from your initial plan can also for sure help. And I mean, talking about deviations, I think a lot of people now actually need to jump off the call because we already reached the 4 hour time, as always, has been flying. And Anne, there are some questions still in the chat. I was so free to say that we will be answering them in individual follow-ups, so I captured them all. And thank you so much also from our side that you have joined the session. Super interesting. And yeah, I would be loving to see you also in person, maybe at one of our next climate transformation summits, where for sure also some people from the call will be present. So I will also talk to you about this later. But then, yeah, if this shall now be the end, then I of course also hope to see you all at our next webinar with Essity. And Arne, maybe here the last word to you to say goodbye to this climate community.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I hope you will now go out, take the phone and start building ecosystems for change. If there is any questions, if you're interested on something, you're of course welcome to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Laura, as always, for the nice collaboration also. And we will be sharing